Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 59 in our incredible new tutorial series where you're learning how to think like an engineer using the Arduino Uno R for Wi-Fi. What I will need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we will be using the Sunfounder Elite Explorer Kit. Now, hopefully most of you guys already have your gear, but if you don't, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon, and you can hop on over there and pick your kit up. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot easier if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's talk about what I am going to teach you today. I'm going to show you how you can plot or graph any data on any OLED screen, okay? And it's pretty straightforward, but if you just try to wing it and you try to do it without doing the math, it can get very, very confusing. So I'm going to show you for any data set, for any function, that you can graph that function on any OLED screen and even any part of that OLED screen. And we're going to develop a function in today's lesson that will allow you to do that. Now, you might have gotten here two different ways. One way you might have gotten here is just you might be a drive-by shooter who just searched on something and ended up on this lesson. And if you did, it's very easy to hook up your OLED as we show here. We have SDA connected to SDA, SCL connected to SCL or SCK, and then we have VDD to 5 volts, and we have ground to ground. So it's very easy to hook up. Now, if you look at my rig here and the rig of the people that are actually taking the class week by week, we've got something a little bit more complicated here. Okay, we've got the OLED, and we have a pressure sensor, we have a go button, we have a power supply, and we have the Arduino. But for if you got that set up, leave it set up, because we're going to continue working on our weather station. But if you don't have it set up, all you need to do is hook up the OLED. Okay, now that's one way. You might have just ended up on this lesson, or you might be taking the lesson week by week. Now, if you're taking the lesson week by week, where are we? Last week, I gave you the assignment of creating a little weather barometric pressure project where you would display the barometric pressure on the SSD 1306, and then down below you would make a graph that would show the barometric pressure over the last 24 hours. That was your homework assignment. So I got to ask you guys, my class members, I got to ask you, were you successful? If you were successful, leave a comment down below. I am legend, double chest bump. And if you were not successful, leave a comment down below. I folded up like a cheap Walmart lawn chair. Now, when I was giving you the assignment, I just thought, okay, you could go in and just kind of wing it with creating the graph. Like, you got to kind of reverse it, because on the OLED screen, the larger numbers go down. So increasing as you go down, your pixel number is increasing. So I thought you could kind of take your data, flip it over, scoot it down, and then normalize it to the part of the screen you were doing. But that turns out to be hard. So what I'm just going to show you, I'm going to show you how to do it the right way. I'm going to show you how to do the math. And then once you have this little function, it'll be very easy to go in and make this thing work for the weather station. But for right now, I'm going to show you how you can graph any arbitrary set of data onto any OLED screen or any part of the OLED screen. Does that sound good? I hope it does. Okay, so the secret of this is, who is your friend? Math is your friend, and it's very simple math. But what I find is almost everyone understands the simple math, but when they hit a problem in the real world, they never realize that they have the tool to solve the problem. It's kind of like you got a hammer, you got a screwdriver, you've got all this stuff, but the first time you see a nail, you panic and you don't know what to do. So you start trying to use your elbow or something instead of saying, hey, that's a nail, I've got a hammer. Okay, so let's talk about the nail and the hammer. So what do we have? We're going to have some arbitrary set of data. This is data from the real world, okay? And that data has some domain. It has some minimum x value, and it has some maximum x value. Then it has some range. It has some minimum y value and some maximum y value. And then in that box, all of your data fits. So let's draw the box arbitrarily for the data that you might have. Okay, so I'm going to come up here and I've got this point, and what would that point be? Let's just draw the 4 points. Okay, I'm going to draw the 4 points, and let's start in the lower left. What would your lower left point be? That would be your minimum x value, and that would be your minimum y value. Okay, that would be your minimum x value and your minimum y value. Now, what am I going to have in the upper right? I'm going to have my x max value and my y max value. Does that make sense? You're going all the way to the right, that's your max x value, and you're going all the way up, and that's your max y value. Well, let's go ahead and fill in these other corners. This would still be x max, okay? But in this case, this is going to be y min, because you're at the bottom of the graph. Now, what is this going to be? This is going to be x min, right? That's going to be your minimum x. And then what is it going to be? It's going to be your y max. You know, 90% of this project is just drawing these boxes. Okay, so this is where I am. This is the data that I have. Okay, but what you have to see is you have to put the data you have on the OLED you have. And they're not mapped the same. So you have to map what the data that you have. You have to map the data that you have onto the OLED that you have. So what does our OLED look like? Our OLED has 4 corners. Okay, our OLED has 4 corners. So this is like your physical OLED. Well, what is this? This would be your leftmost pixel, and this would be your top pixel. So if you gave this an XY value, it is the left top pixel, right? It's the left top pixel. Well, what would this pixel be? This would be the rightmost pixel, and this would be the bottom pixel. So it would be right bottom, and it would be left top. Okay, what would this be? This is your right pixel, and this is your pixel top. Okay, that's what that corner would be. What would this corner be? See if you can do it. It's P what? It's the left pixel. And then it is what? It is the bottom pixel, like that. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So what we want to do is we want to take the data that we have, and then we want to map it onto the display that we have. All right, so what do we have to do? The data set that we have is going to be a set of x values and a set of y values. So it's x, y coordinates for all of your points. So it's going to be the set of x and it's going to be the set of y. What do we need to do? It's very simple. We have to normalize the y values and we have to normalize the x values. We have to take the y values we have, and map them onto the screen we have. We have to take the x values that we have and map them onto the screen we have. So let's start by normalizing the y data. So I am going to normalize the y. And it's simply writing a linear equation. Okay, so let's think here. Let's think. What do I have? I've got a y max and I have a y min. Okay, I have a y max and I have a y min, right? Well, now, if I have a y max, what do I want to map that onto? That y max I need to map onto pt, right? So I want y max to become pt. Does that make sense? Now what else do I have? I have a y min, and I want that y min to map onto what? The bottom pixel. Does that make sense? 90% of it is just understanding that simple thing that I just put. I have what? 2 points. If I have 2 points, I can create a line, a linear relationship for everything between those 2 points. So what do I want to do? I want to calculate the slope. What is the slope? It is y2 minus y1, which for those points above would be pb minus pt over what? x2 minus x1. So what would the x values be? Here and here. So that would be y min minus y max. Does that make sense? I really hope that makes sense. It would be pb minus pt over y min minus y max. Now what is the equation of a line? It's y minus y1 is equal to x onto x minus x1. Okay, what is x1? x1 would be y max. What would y1 be? It would be pt. Okay, so then this becomes pretty easy. I have y minus y1, which is pt. My y minus pt is equal to the slope that I just calculated, and this should have been here, m. Okay, right, this is m. Y minus y1 is m onto x minus x1. So y minus pt is going to be p bottom minus p top over y min minus y max times what? X minus x1. What's x1? It's y max. Guys, we're almost there. Now all I've got to do is add pt to both sides, and then I have an equation that allows me to calculate the normalized y. The y normalized is going to be equal to it's going to be equal to pb minus pt over y min minus y max times x minus y max, okay, plus your pt. Okay, now the one thing that you've got to see is what is x? X is your raw y values. Okay, so the x in this equation is those y that you start with. Okay, so finally, what do we end up with? We end up with y normalized is equal to pb minus pt over y min minus y max. And then what did we say our x values were? That's that whole array of y data. Well, why is it? It's y that we're normalizing. Okay, so that would be our y raw data, and then what do we have? Minus y max, and then plus the pt. And then that is going to be our equation. So I'm sorry, you can you guys can see that, right? It's on the bottom, y min minus y max. You see that? Okay. So you write that down. Okay, you write that down. And that is p top that I'm adding. I'm adding p top. Okay. Make sure that you see that that is p top. All right. So now let me get further out of your way. And let's come over here. And now what are we going to do? We are going to normalize x values. We're going to normalize the x values. Okay. Now let's think, what are our x values? Well, I have the PL and I have the PR. Okay, that's what I want to go to. What I have is I have X min and X max. That's my data. My data has a minimum X value and a maximum X value. And I want to map that onto my OLED screen, which has a pixel left and a pixel right. Okay, so now what points do I have? Well, my X min, that's going to go to what? The left pixel. And then what do I have? My X max is going to go to which pixel? My right pixel. Okay, now I have what? I have 2 points. I can make a line. M is equal to y2 minus y1, which is going to be PR minus PL over X max minus X min, like that. That is the slope of the line, PR minus PL over X max minus X min. Now, what does that go to? Well, I'm going to come up here so I don't run out of screen. But now remember, y minus y1, y minus, what is y1? What is y1? PL, right? So y minus y1 would be y minus PL. Y minus PL is equal to M. What is M? That's PR minus PL over X max minus X min onto what? X minus X1. And what is X1? X1 is X min. Okay, that looks good. Now let's write this properly. Okay, let's write this properly. In this case, the y that I'm calculating is what? It is the normalized x, x norm. Okay, and why is that? Because we're normalizing x here. So x norm is going to be equal to PR minus PL over X max minus X min onto X. And in this case, what is the X? It is the X raw minus X min plus PL. Right? Because I'm adding this one over to the other side. So let me see if I can write that down clearly. X norm, X normalized is equal to PR minus PL over x max minus x min times x raw minus x min plus PL. All right, let me check that. PR minus PL over X max minus X min, X raw minus X min plus PL, that's right. And then this one is Y norm is PB minus PT over Y min minus Y max onto Y raw minus Y max. Okay, so what do I start with? Let's make sure we did what we started with. I start with my raw X and my raw Y. So I take my raw X and I calculate my normalized X. I take my raw Y and I calculate my normalized Y. Okay, and so these are my raw values. Those are my actual data. And then over here are my normalized numbers that will plot nicely on the OLED screen. Okay, so I guess I might have been in your way there. Make sure you can see that equation. X raw minus X min plus PL. Write those two equations down because you're going to need a man or woman. Okay, so now let's jump in and let's see if we do that. So this means when I have data from a sensor, from a function, from a calculation, all I've got to do is look at my data and say, what's the minimum X and the maximum X? What is the minimum Y and the maximum Y? Then I look at my OLED, what is the starting row and column, and what is the starting X and Y value, the minimum pixel X, the minimum pixel Y, and the maximum pixel X and the maximum pixel Y. And those four numbers then will allow me to do this calculation back behind me, okay? And then for any raw X, I can calculate the normalized X. For any raw Y, I can calculate the normalized Y, okay? I hope that makes sense. Let's jump in and start coding, okay? Who's ready to start coding? I am ready to have a little sip of coffee, I do believe, after I get my code window up. All right. Now, hopefully you guys, if you're on this lesson, you know a little bit about the OLED. If you don't, go back and look at my earlier lesson in this class about how to install the libraries and all of that stuff. But to get this show on the road, I'm going to assume that you kind of are at least a little bit familiar with the OLED. So if we're going to use the OLED, we're going to need to include some libraries. So I am going to pound include. We're doing I2C. We will need the SPI.h library. We are going to pound include. And what are we going to include? We're going to include the wire.h library. Then for the OLED, we are going to include the most excellent Adafruit _ GFX. This is the Adafruit graphics library.h. Okay, and then the pound include the Adafruit _ SSD 1306.h. And those two don't come with your IDE, so you need to install those two. You ought to know how to install libraries. If you don't, go back and look at my earlier OLED lesson in this class, and I show you how to install the libraries if you need any help. Okay, now what do we start with? We start with our raw data. Well, you might have a whole lot of raw data, so what do you need? You need an array to store that data in. You need an array for the X values and you need an array for the Y values. And this is your measured or calculated raw data. So what are we going to call this? It is going to be a float, the raw X data. That could be anything. And how many points can I have? Well, the screen is only 128 pixels across, so I can't have more than 128 data points. Well, I'm also going to need an array for what? My raw Y data. And similarly, if I have 128 X locations, I will need the corresponding 128 Y locations. Okay, now I need, so that's the raw data. Now I need that normalized data. Now the normalized data is going to be based on pixels on the screen, right? The OLED. So my normalized data, I can have pixel 3 or I can have pixel 4, but I can't have pixel 3.5. So those need to be integers. So now what I am going to have is my normalized X data, and it's an integer, but it's going to be 128 points. And then I'm going to have my, you guessed it, my normalized Y data. And really now it's just about taking the raw X and calculating the normalized X and taking the raw Y and calculating the normalized Y. And we did the math, so it's going to be easy. All right. So I've got those two things. What else am I going to need here? Well, now let's start thinking about my data set. My raw data set is going to have some Y minimum value. All right. Now for this exercise, I'm going to plot a sine wave. And for a sine wave, the minimum Y value of a sine wave is -1. If you're plotting something else, put what your minimum is. Okay. And then I'm also going to have a Y. I'm going to have a Y max. Now think about that last picture, right? We had a Y min and we had a Y max. Well, what's the maximum value that a sine wave will go to? It's 1. Okay. Now on the X min, my X min, a sine wave, you can start at 0 and plot out to 2 pi. If you plot an X value from 0 to 2 pi, from 0 to 2 pi, you will get one full cycle of the sine wave. So my X min is going to be equal to 0, and my X max is going to be equal to 2 times pi. Now, I don't know how to magically get the constant pi, so I'm just going to type it in up here. It is a floating point number, and pi is equal to 3.141599265. I think that should be close enough for these purposes, don't you? Like a million times overkill almost. So I've got X min, X max. Now we're going to need to know how many points we are going to have. So I'm going to say int num points. Now, if I have 128 pixels across, I can't really have more than 128 data points. So the number of data points I will have is 128. All right. And then now what we got to start thinking about is I've done my Y min and I've done my Y max. And then here I should have been more diligent, and this is float X min and float X max. All right. Now I've got to think of my OLED screen, right? I need the top pixel, the bottom pixel, the left pixel, and the right pixel. Now what you could do is you could say the top is 0 and the bottom is, you might be tempted to say 64, but it would be 63 since you said the top is row 0, pixel 0, then the bottom would be pixel 63. And then you could say going left and right, the left pixel is 0 and the right pixel is 127. So you could put those in like that. But you can put them whatever you want. You could put them where the whole graph is just going to show up in a portion of the screen, like the lower half or the lower quadrant. You see, you could put these things, you could put your graph anywhere on the OLED that you want by defining the PL, the PR, the PT, and the PB. Okay, but let's start by just filling the screen. So if I want to fill the screen, the P, I need to do a int on these, an int, the P top, The top is what? The top is row 0. Okay, I'm going to make it row 0. I'm going to say use the very top pixel, and then the P bottom, we're going to make 63 because we want to fill the screen, right? We want to fill our screen. Now we're going to do the left and right. The P left, again, is going to be 0. And now int the P right is going to be not 128 because we started at 0. It'll be 127, like that. Okay. That all looks pretty good to me. Now we got to get ready to get the OLED going. And so what I'm going to do is I need to define the screen width, and that's going to be equal to 128. And then I'm going to do the screen height, and that's going to be equal to 64 pixels. Okay. And then the OLED reset pin. Mine does not have a reset pin, so we set that to -1. Now, what is the I2C address? Add fruit underscore SSD. What is that? No. I need to do the screen address. I didn't do that. So I'm going to define my screen underscore address. And for this OLED that comes with the kit, it is 0x3C, and most are. If you don't seem to be talking to your OLED, go to toptechboy.com, and I've got a lesson on how to scan your I2C bus to find the address of your OLED. So that is define E, okay, like that. And then screen address. So now I've got the screen address defined. Now I've got to go to the library, add a fruit underscore SSD 1306. That is the library. Now I need to create my object. I'm going to call my screen OLED. You can call yours whatever you want, but you will need to tell it your screen width that we just defined and your screen height that you just defined. And then is this where we put, yeah, we've got to also pass it the wire library, and that's done most peculiarly with the and wire. And then let me get all the way out of your way, the and wire. And then it needs to know the reset. So what is your reset pin? We set that up above, reset, like that. Okay. So that is creating our OLED object. Let's go ahead and run this thing and make sure that we get rid of our typos before we go on. Okay. Have a little sip of your coffee. As we wait, I will come back to my more nominal size. This is looking pretty good. It doesn't mean it's right. It just means I don't have any typos. Okay, so that is going to be okay. Now we are going to come down to our void setup, and there's a couple of things we're going to need to do here. We always might want to print, so I'm going to say a serial dot begin, and we're going to do a 115/200 just because we can. And now let's start that OLED object that we created. So we'll do an OLED.begin, and we've got to tell it to use the switch capacitor. So we will say switch, or no, I'm sorry, we will say SSD 1306 underscore switch, and then cap for capacitor, and then VCC, like that. Then we need to give it the screen underscore address that we just set up. Okay, that is pretty good. And I think that's all that we need to do. Okay, this define, on a define like the include, you don't put the semicolon in there. Okay. I'm just glancing over my code. Okay, so we have started the OLED. Now what I like to do is I like to go ahead and clear the display because I don't know what someone might have left on there. Excuse me. Okay, clear display. And now OLED.display. Okay, now understand that OLED.clearDisplay just clears your register or clears your your buffer where the data is stored, and then physically it doesn't turn it off the screen until you do the OLED display. So you have to clear the buffer, clear those registers, and then you display the cleared register. So at that point, it should be all set. Okay, now what do we want to plot? What do we want to plot? I want to plot a sine wave. And if I'm going to plot a sine wave, I've got to create a sine wave. So I'm going to say for integer I, that's going to be my index. I'm going to start at 0, and then I'm going to go to I is less than num points. Why less than? Because if I start at 0, I need to stop 1 before num points. Okay? And that should be a semicolon. Num points. And then I'm going to have I is equal to I plus 1. And then I'm going to open this for loop. Now, I need to calculate what? My x values and my y values associated with a sine wave. Well, if you want to plot one complete cycle of a sine wave, you need to plot between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so now I need to create my raw x data. And so raw x data of I is going to be equal to I times 2 times pi divided by 127. So let's think about that. That at the first I, my x value is going to be 0. That's right. And then when I get all the way out to the last thing, 127, that would be 127 divided by 127 is 1 times 2 pi. So it would go all the way out to 2 pi. So I'm going to plot everything from 0 to 2 pi, which is what we wanted to do. Now, if we calculate the raw x, we need to calculate the raw y data of I. And that's going to be equal to, that is going to be equal to the sine value of what? The x value that we just created. Okay, so we create the x value, and then we calculate the y value as the sine of the x value. Okay, does that make sense? Let's print it, serial.println, and what are we going to print? We're going to print raw y data of I, which we just calculated. And let's see if that looks like a sine value. Let's see if it looks like a sine wave, okay? So we're going to run it. Okay, let's look over here. Wow, that's going by fast, but let's see if we can look at it being plotted. That is going, let me show you there. You don't see that. I'll move it over here. You see, that is going so darn fast. Let's turn that off, and let's slow it down a little bit. Let's say a delay of, let's say, 1/10 of a second, and hopefully that'll allow us to see the sine wave a little better. So you see, if you go to the serial monitor, you just graph it, you just plot the raw data, right? But if we're going to go to the OLED, we're going to have to normalize that raw data. Okay, I'm going to bring this over here where you can see it. And you see what we're generating is a most beautiful, we are generating a most beautiful sine wave. Okay, so you see we've got our raw data. We're generating a sine wave. Congratulations. Now we'll get rid of that. But what is the problem? I can't plot that raw sine wave onto the OLED. What do I need to do? I need to normalize. And so I'm just going to call the function norm data. And that's going to normalize that raw X data, and it's going to create, it's going to take that raw X data and it's going to turn it into the normalized X data. It's going to take the raw Y data and it's going to create the normalized Y data. Now, what I am going to do here is that's calling the function. I'm going to define the function. This is a long lesson already, so I'm just using global variables, so everything will be go quicker here as we're trying to develop this. But I call norm data, and so I need to define norm data. All right, if I call norm data, I'm going to need to define norm data. And so what I will do here, I will come after the end of the void loop. And now what do I need to do? I'm going to make it a void because I'm not returning anything. I'm just manipulating those arrays. I'm going to create a void and then what? Norm data, like that. Not passing it anything. Why? Because I am using global variables. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to normalize that data. So I'm going to step through the data. So I'm going to go from integer from I equals 0. I'm going to go to I is less than num points. Okay. And then I'm going to go I equal I plus 1, just like before. So I'm going to step through all of that data. I will need to put my curlies for the for loop. Now, what do I want to do? I want to calculate my normalized X data, okay, of I. Now, what is that equal to? That's equal to that equation that we had a while ago. That's equal to that equation that we had a while ago. And what is that? It was the slope, which was what? PR minus PL, okay, divided by, open parentheses, X max minus X min, okay, that divided by that, times the what? Times the raw X, and I'm going to put an open parenthesis here, don't miss that, raw X data of I minus X min plus PL. All right, now go back and look at that equation. I think I got it in there. So I have the raw X data, and I calculate the normalized X data based on that equation we came up with, PR minus PL over X max minus X min, raw X data minus X min plus PL. Okay, if I calculate the normalized X data, I'm also going to need to calculate what? The normalized Y data of I is going to be equal to PR minus, or no, PB minus PT, okay, PB minus PT divided by Y min minus Y max, PB minus PT, Y min minus Y max, times, this time the raw, what? The raw Y data of I minus what? It's going to be Y max. Okay. Minus Y max and then plus PT. And if you don't believe me, you go back and look. Okay. Raw the normalized y, the raw y, minus y max plus pt. Normalized x is raw x minus x min plus PL. Man, those things you gotta pay attention putting those equations in there, but I think that I got them right. Okay, I think that I got them right. So now I have the raw data. Now I have the normalized data that's going to fit on the OLED very nicely. Well, what do I want to do now? What I want to do now is I want to OLED dot plot, no, it's just plot graph like that, and then OLED dot display like that. Okay, now what's the one problem? I haven't defined plot graph yet, because to plot a graph, I'm going to have to go in and put in a whole lot of little, I got to go in and put in a whole lot of little lines to create the graph. So let's come down and let's define plot graph. So it will be after my void norm data, I will have a void plot graph like this. Okay. And then what do I want to do? I want to OLED, and then I want to put my axes in there. I want to put my axes in there. So I'm going to do an OLED draw line. And what will I want to go from? I want to go from the left to the left top, the top left, PLPT, and I want to go to the PLPB. So that will draw a vertical line, okay? And then I got to tell it white, like that. So I go from the top left to the bottom left for my y-axis, then OLED dot draw line. And I want my horizontal axis. Well, that's going to go from the left pixel on the bottom to the right pixel on the bottom. And we got to give it the old white there. Okay, so now that has got my coordinate axis down like this. Now what I want to do is I want to plot all the points. So I'm going to say for int I is equal to 0 to I is less than num points. This time I have to stop 1 before num points minus 1, because I'm going to go from this point in the array to the next one, and then from this point to the next one. So since I'm looking forward, I've got to stop 1 before the end. And then I is equal to I plus 1. Now open that for loop. Now this is pretty easy. I've got a OLED dot draw line. Where do I want to draw a line from? I'm doing the normalized x data. So I'm going to say norm x data of I. That is the x coordinate of the point. And then it's also going to need what? The y coordinate of the point. Y data of I. Okay, now I'm also going to need to go from that point to the next point, which would be norm x data of the next point would be I plus 1, and then norm y data of I plus 1. And never fear, I'll get out of your way. Okay, so I've got norm x data, norm y data, norm x data of I plus 1, norm y data of I plus 1. So that all looks pretty good. And then it still wants that nuisance white parameter like that. Okay, now this is going to be kind of interesting. We are probably going to have a plethora. We are probably going to have a plethora of typos in here because we haven't run it in a while. But let's just go ahead and run it. And so you will keep your eyes down here on the serial monitor so we can see if we have any problems. And then we're going to come here and we're going to try to run this thing. We're getting through it. Where are my errors? Where are my errors? Unexpected error. What is that? Okay. So void norm data. Where is that? Okay. Oh, yeah. Not a comma like that. Okay. Hopefully you guys caught that. Okay, and this one, did I do that same thing? I thought I fixed that. Or was that a different one? Okay. It is semicolon in our for loops. Looking, okay, all eyes on the OLED and all eyes on the OLED and denied. We did not get anything there. So why did we not get anything displayed? Why did we not get anything displayed? Okay, we got the graph. Let's see. Ah, we did get it. Just took it a second. Okay, it just took it a second. Why did it take? Oh, I know what's wrong. We do not need this nonsense in here slowing us down. So this time it should go faster. Let's see if I can get an overhead view here that will show this to you a little bit better. Okay, now, yeah, I want to really zoom in on this now because this is what you need to see. I'm only able to focus at a certain point there. I think that looks good. Okay, so now let's come in. We made a sine wave. It started at 0, it went to 2 pi, it went from 1 to -1, and we got 1 full cycle, and we got the axis on there. So that's pretty cool. You see what I did was I left that delay in there. It took a long time to get there, but that scared me because I thought, why is that darn thing not showing? Okay, so now it is downloading and it is going to boom, and now it came right up. And so I guess you didn't even see it blink because it was still there from the last time. Okay, now let me ask you, what if I had to display some text or some numbers or something else? What if I wanted that graph to only be in the bottom half of the screen? If I want that graph only in the bottom half of the screen, I've got to come in and say on the top, instead of starting at pixel 0, I want to start the top pixel being pixel 32. And you didn't see any of that, did you? So I come up here, and this was PT0. I said the top pixel was 0, but now I want to make the top pixel 32. So let's try that. So I'm going to do that. I will come back over here, and that should put it where the top is at pixel 32. Let's see what happens. Boom. Now up at the top, I've got room to do something else with. All right, let's come back over here. Let's try something else. Let's say that I would want to plot 2 sine waves. Okay, 2 cycles. All right, I want to plot 2 cycles. Well, in that case, what I would do is I would say that the raw x is it's not the sine of the raw x, it's a sine of 2 times the raw x. And now if I do that, I should get 2 cycles of the sine wave. It should still be in the bottom half, but now I should see 2 cycles of the sine wave. Boom, 2 cycles. We go up, up, and then back to 0, 2 full cycles of the sine wave. What if I wanted 2 full cycles in the lower quadrant, right? I want to get it all in that bottom quarter of the screen. Well, in that case, I would come up here, right? I would come up here, and instead of my left pixel being 0, I would want my left pixel being something like 64, like halfway across the screen. So now let's see what happens if I do that. You guys didn't see that, did you? Let me come back over here. All right. And you see what I did was I said the left pixel, instead of being 0, the left pixel is 64. Okay. So now let's run it again. And then let's come back over here. So we're running it again, and I want it down in the lower quadrant, and I want 2 cycles. Let's see. Boom. Look at that. Do you guys see that? Lower quadrant. You could get 4 graphs on this tiny little screen. That's 2 segments of the sine wave, 2 cycles of the sine wave in the lower quadrant of the screen. Okay. Now, this is a long video, but man, I could go on for 15 minutes. I could plot on that same graph the sine and the cosine wave. I could put sine here. I could put cosine here. You see, I could get 4 graphs on here. So what I would claim that we have done is plot any graph on any OLED, on any portion of the OLED. And what was the secret of all this? The secret of it was to do the math. And once we did the math, everything turned out to be pretty easy. You see that monkey? Do you guys see that monkey? Wow, we've got a monkey in the tree. Do you see him up there? You guys can stop if you want, but oh, he just jumped. He just jumped. Okay, I won't get digressed. Okay, guys, I hope, that was my monkey alarm. I hope you guys are having as much fun taking this class as I am making it. I need to go ahead and I need to give you your homework assignment. And what your homework assignment now is, now that you know how to graph, now go in and with this overall system that we have set up with the BMP 180, what I want you to do is go back and finish your original homework assignment, which was to create that barometric pressure little widget, where up at the top here, up at the top, you're going to display the barometric pressure, the normalized barometric pressure in inches of mercury. And then down here, you're going to plot what the barometric pressure has been over the last 24 hours. If the barometric pressure is coming up, you know that it's going to be clearing and becoming a fair day or fair weather. If the barometric pressure is dropping, you're going to have inclement weather. You're going to have clouds. You're going to have storms coming in. And the faster it drops, the more intense the storm that's coming in. So I want you to turn this into a little weather widget with your BMP 180 sensor. So guys, I hope you are having as much fun taking this class as I am making it. As always, I want to give a shout out to my Patreon supporters. I want to give you a big thank you that right now, the only way that I can continue to produce 2 new quality videos every single week is through my Patreon supporters. So thank you guys for standing with me. You can also help me by leaving a comment down below. That'll help me with the old YouTube juice. And then also give me a thumbs up for the video. If you haven't already, subscribed to the channel. When you do, ring that bell so you'll get notification when future lessons drop. And most importantly, share this video with other people, because the world needs more people doing engineering and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.